I'm Isabel Sparrow, Chief Storyteller at Carbon Copy, and I'm delighted to be joined by Alex Rathmell, Managing Director at EnergyPro Ltd, who's going to tell us about how to help SMEs with energy efficiency. So Alex, I know you've got some slides, so if you want to get those up and let's go.
Yes, certainly. Okay, just bear with me a second. Okay. How does that look?
Yep, see that perfectly.
Very good. Great. Well, look, thanks very much for having me, Isabel, and all. Nice to be speaking to you. So, my name's Alex Rathmell. I work for a company called EnergyPro. We are consultants, and we're also investors in clean energy projects, and we focus specifically on energy efficiency, by which we mean, perhaps obviously, helping organizations to use less energy to do what they do, and that might be done through an operational change, or it might be done through implementing a project like putting in some new lighting or a new boiler or something along those lines. So the focus for this discussion is about SMEs, small and medium businesses, and they're a tricky corner of the market, I suppose, to engage with discussions about energy efficiency. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about that and then get into just a few sort of facts and figures about a solution that we've been developing using some UK government funding that is designed to help to facilitate SME energy efficiency at a local level, so at a county level or a city level. So that's called ESCO-in-a-box. ESCO is just Energy Services Company. That's what that acronym means. Okay, so here we go. So the first thing to say is that energy efficiency is really important. It's something that almost all companies could do and could do more of, and it would help them to be more profitable, it would help them to be more resilient, and it would help them to have a lower carbon footprint and environmental impact. So the government estimate is that there's about 5.8 billion, with a B, worth of attractive energy efficiency investment that could be made. And by attractive, we mean that's the easy stuff, like upgrading to LED lighting and that sort of thing. And that's currently locked away within small businesses that are not taking that action. But that action is also good for the wider economy, because essentially what it's doing is stopping money from being wasted on energy bills, and instead taking that value and paying somebody to come and do some work on your premises. So it's potentially capturing economic value within a local area, increasing low carbon jobs. And finally, of course, it's really important from an environmental point of view. We have a target as a country now to get to net zero carbon, and it is simply impossible to get there without very substantial investment in energy efficiency, so reducing demand for energy as well as going green on the supply side. So it's really important. What we wanted to do with this project, ESCO-in-a-box, was look at another area of success, I suppose, in the energy sphere, which has been the community energy movement in the UK, where communities get together and develop generally renewable energy projects in their local area. And what we wanted to do is to look at why that's been, I mean, it's not easy, but it's been very successful in the UK relative to other countries. And we wanted to look at why that's the case, and can we learn any lessons from that. And I just wanted to highlight three things that community energy does really well. It appeals to people's values. So people invest in it because they care about their local environment. It's locally focused. So it's not something that's happening a million miles away or at the other end of a long wire, where your electricity is being generated. It's something that's happening for the benefit of your immediate locality. And the third thing is that it's now very professionalized. So there are clear project development pathways and standards that de-risk the process of putting some money into a community energy project. So we wanted to take some inspiration from all of that on the basis that most SMEs are very, very locally focused in what they do. They employ local people, they're probably owned by local people, and of course, mostly their customers are local. There are obviously exceptions, but most businesses fall into that category. They're very, very rooted in their local area. Any business that's ever sponsored a roundabout can tell you that, you know, what happens locally matters to them. So could we use this idea as a way to get them to do more energy efficiency? That's basically what we wanted to explore. At the moment, they do very little, as I mentioned at the beginning, unfortunately. And this is not to sort of blame anybody or any business. It's very rational for them to do very little on energy efficiency, because when you're an SME, particularly at the moment, but at any time, what you need to be is extremely focused on your core business, and anything that distracts you from that, that's not material, is just that, is a distraction. And energy efficiencies always fall into that category. So they might do some energy efficiency by accident when they buy some new equipment. It will probably be more efficient than the last thing, or the thing that it replaces. But there's very little proactive sort of invest to save in energy efficiency measures in the SME segment. And that one thing that makes them different to larger businesses is that they don't have such strong regulatory pressure on them to take that action. They don't have, for example, you know, requirements to disclose their environmental impact as much as larger businesses do. They don't have institutional investors demanding to know what they're doing about climate change. You know, so they have some customer pressure, but mostly they've got the pressure of just staying in business, and that's, you know, that's what's their overwhelming priority. And I think it's fair to say that currently, so there are ESCOs, energy services companies, that exist to provide energy efficiency products and services, but they tend to focus on the larger businesses, and particularly the public sector. And they're very poor at the moment at serving the particular needs of the SME segment, which is a massive chunk of the economy. So there's plenty to go at here. So we wanted to explore the idea that if you had a local one-stop shop that could work with businesses in a region, would they have some success at engaging those businesses in a conversation about energy efficiency, and then help them to actually do a project and undertake some measures? But it's a tricky market. Although there's lots of it, it's a tricky market to deal with. So the projects themselves are individually very small, although they might add up to a large opportunity. There are also gaps in the supply chain. So there's lots of people that can sell you lighting, but as you get into more advanced technologies and more projects that involve multiple energy saving measures, the engineering gets trickier and trickier, and the supply chain is not particularly well adapted to that kind of work. It's well adapted for product replacements and like-for-like swaps and that sort of thing. And the final point is that the finance for these projects is difficult, because SMEs do find it difficult to access finance, and are unlikely, particularly at the moment, to have enough cash in the bank to do a project, you know, just from their own funds. So we needed to figure out, you know, how projects could be financed, and that's something that we've been able to make some progress on. So the basic idea is that we've combined good practice that's come from the way that larger projects for larger companies are done, with those very local routes to market. So working with local authorities, the community energy sector, people that are talking the same language as the businesses that they're trying to help and support. But we wouldn't expect them to get to this level on their own. We are hoping that by giving them a toolkit that allows them to develop SME energy efficiency projects and then deliver them, that we can very quickly move to the point that the community energy sector is at with renewables, whereby it can become something that's done, you know, time and again in a standardized way, and that becomes a sensible place to, you know, to focus your money and your investment, but also, you know, the time and energy of the people on the ground. So ESCO-in-a-box is, as the name implies, is a toolkit for doing all of that. This is very simple how it works. EP Connect is a a company that doesn't exist yet, but that is the brand that we'll be using to market ESCO-in-a-box. It's just be a subsidiary of EnergyPro. But we've developed this solution now over the last 12, 18 months. And the way that we've done that is working with a team in Oxfordshire from an organisation called Low Carbon Hub, which is a community interest company, and a team from Oxford Brookes University. And they have established, with our help, a new ESCO in Oxfordshire to serve businesses in that region. That's called Energy Solutions Oxfordshire. So they are both our first licensee, if you like, for ESCO-in-a-box, but they're also a partner and a collaborator, and their experience has directly informed the way that we've built the solution. So obviously the idea is that we now take that to other parts of the country and we say, look, wouldn't it be great if you could engage businesses in your area with energy efficiency and clean energy projects? Here's a toolkit that will enable you to do it. And that's the journey that we're on at the moment. We're just about 3 or 4 months from the end of our BASE funded project. So we're hoping to have a few more of these licenses up and running by the time that comes to an end. So ESCO-in-a-box, I won't go through this in any great detail, but essentially it contains everything that should be needed. So there's a software platform that provides all the workflow for professional people who are going to take clients through that customer journey of identifying what energy efficiency projects could be done, and then developing those with local contractors who have been pre-vetted, and then helping to deliver them with those local contractors. And along the way, you're using a set of standardized contracts, a standardized way of financing projects, and we've got 2 finance partners on board who are able to provide loans and leases and hire purchases to clients that want to use them. They don't have to use them, but they're available if they do. And everything that's needed from a kind of customer support point of view. And all of that should bake in the good practice that we've developed over the last year with our friends in Oxfordshire. And the process that the client goes through is something like this. So starting with a feasibility study, which is free. So the client gets to see what the energy efficiency opportunities might be on their premises. And there's no obligation at that stage. So there's a report that's hopefully useful and actionable in its own right. If they want to go forward to develop an actual project, then they move into the implementation study phase. If they do that, then they commit to covering the costs of all the engineering that goes into that next stage if they don't go ahead with the project. And if they do go ahead, then all of that's wrapped into the overall project. And then when they get to that stage, they sign an energy services agreement with the local ESCO, the one-stop shop, that promises a level of energy savings that will exceed the amount that the business needs to pay back under the finance, if that makes sense. So if they have to pay back, £100 a month over 3 years for the project, then the ESCO is committing that the energy cost saving will be greater than £100 a month. So there will always be cash generative and cash positive from the outset of the project, wherever possible. Sometimes there will be cases where that's not possible, but of course that will be, transparent up front. So the ESCO then helps to implement the project and provides all the quality assurance. There are big issues in this industry with trusting contractors, particularly smaller ones, and standards of work are not always what they should be. And we think these ESCOs have a really important role in managing that. And then providing M&V and O&M are just some industry acronyms for after sales, essentially. So measurement and verification, proving the savings that have been achieved, hopefully, or if they haven't been achieved, then figuring out why. And O&M is just operations and maintenance. So making sure that the technology that's gone in, particularly if it's new or innovative, is looked after for the period of the project and beyond. And then the reason we've drawn this as a circle is that we think that this will be a really interesting platform for a long-term relationship with businesses in an area. So most regions of the country have declared a climate emergency, and many of them have committed to specific targets for reaching net zero emissions. And the emissions that the business sector is responsible for are going to be absolutely crucial to realizing those ambitions. So we think this is a great way of establishing a relationship that can then deepen over time, and to help those businesses to decarbonize more and more as time goes on. So it shouldn't just be limited to a one-off project. It should be the start of a journey, if that's not too cheesy, but it's the start of a journey that should eventually end at net zero, is the idea.
Yeah.
Just a couple more. So suffice to say, we're looking for new partners. We've got some very advanced discussions now in other regions of the UK beyond Oxfordshire, so particularly the West Midlands and the Southwest. But keen to hear from community energy groups, local authorities, local enterprise partnerships, universities, and any organisation that has a stake in the kind of low carbon economy in its area, that thinks that businesses might need some more support. So that's what we're trying to do at the moment, and they will take responsibility for all aspects of delivering those services. You can see what it looks like by looking at Energy Solutions Oxfordshire, or ESOX, which is our first ESCO, so energysolutionsOxfordshire.org. So that's the new ESCO hosted by Low Carbon Hub and Oxford Brookes. And they're out there serving businesses in Oxfordshire and developing a pipeline of energy saving projects and working with contractors. Now, obviously, we've been a little bit held up by COVID, hasn't everybody? But we've been really pleased with the amount of traction that has got. So yeah, I would really recommend having a look at the way that they're articulating the service for local businesses, because it's really quite interesting. That's where we're at. I've covered that. So I think that's all I wanted to say, really. But thanks again, and I think we're gonna do questions.
Yeah.
If there are any.
Thank you so much. It sounds like such a valuable service, and something that will really help. Help with that journey towards net zero, which is obviously what we're all about. I think we have a few questions that sort of come to mind. And one really is around the sorts of organizations that you're looking for, when you're thinking about having new partnerships to run these services. You kind of mentioned a few different kinds of organizations, community energy companies and local authorities were in there. And I just sort of wondered how it would work for a local authority, because you mentioned on that slide, it mentioned that organizations that were thinking of doing this would need to have an existing SME customer base, and that might not necessarily be something that sort of feels like a natural fit for a local authority. So, but I can see that a local authority would be a really excellent partner in a lot of ways, because they are quite often responsible for setting the local area target for net zero, and have that kind of responsibility for that. So by having a program like this, it would enable them to have more of an impact on things outside of their own operations. But yeah, how would it work with the local authority, for instance? Because obviously they don't necessarily have the connections with the SMEs that maybe a different kind of organization would.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I think we see local authorities as a host or a kind of broker of this service. I think you're right. Local authorities, rightly or wrongly, have found themselves owning these net zero targets, and I think probably one of the trickiest bits of that to deal with for most of them is going to be the decarbonisation of businesses in the region, because what are you going to do? You're just going to give them a target and tell them to get on with it, because that's not sort of equitable, and it's not very good for local competitiveness or anything else. So the way that challenge, I suppose, will be addressed is, as it stands, I guess, is likely in partnership with the LEP, the Local Enterprise Partnership. And there's lots of these growth hubs around the country that do deal with small businesses or regional businesses on a daily basis. And certainly in the West Midlands discussion that we're having, that relationship between the Local Enterprise Partnership and local businesses is the one that looks really likely to kind of deliver that pipeline of SMEs. but I wouldn't lose sight of the community energy factor as well, which I think is one of the more innovative aspects of this. So taking the example of Low Carbon Hub, they've had lots of business facing activities in the past, and indeed still do in parallel with ESOCs. So they're well connected with local businesses. But even those community energy groups that aren't, that there is the potential for them to build that pipeline by using local connections. And I think the principle is that you're appealing to people's values and their wish to do something in their local area that's positive, and helping provide a pathway for taking that action, which we think is kind of latent within people and therefore in businesses. And you're also giving them a way to showcase it. So ESOCs they've essentially launched a new award scheme called the Energy Pioneer Award, which is a little badge that can give some recognition of an otherwise hidden energy efficiency project, that says, look, we've got these environmental credentials and we want to showcase them to our customers and our suppliers. So it's that sort of thing that works best at a local level. And I think a partnership with, I'm not saying that a community energy group can host this in its own right, it's too big a beast for that, but to be a partner on something that's hosted by the LEP or the local authority, I think that's quite an interesting model, and that's what we're trying to explore.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Definitely. We've got a question here about the sort of resources that would be necessary for the organisation running an ESCO. So obviously, Low Carbon Hub was an organisation in its own right, Oxford Brookes organisation in its own right. What sort of staffing has been required to form this new organisation, and are they people that have been taken away from roles within the two existing organisations, or are they new staff?
It's in that example, it's a mixture. So it is, it's a deployment or a secondment of existing people from both those organisations, and some new hiring as well that's gone on. I think the thing to think about here is to work back from what you want to achieve. So we think that a county level of geography is about the right scale, or possibly a city scale where economic activity is more concentrated, obviously. So to run an ESCO of that sort of scale, like Oxfordshire, requires about 5 to 7 people, that sort of ballpark, and that's where most of the cost is. And if you bring in more frankly, if you bring in more salespeople, then you can do more, and the technical part of it should be quite scalable. But those people are doing marketing and lead generation, business development, account management, and then various technical services, and we're really fortunate to have the team from Oxford Brookes who are providing the technical services. So that's the sort of scale that we're talking about. It's possible that we'll do it in different flavors, so focus on, for example, a particular market segment. If there's a cluster or a concentration of a particular type of business, you might really kind of zoom in on that, and that might be a different scale, or more technically specialist, for example. We may also go bigger, we'll have to see. We're talking about a potential southwest opportunity, which would span a couple of different counties, and also Bristol, Bristol and Plymouth. So that would be a bigger sort of economic entity, but I think hopefully not too big. So yeah, we're sort of feeling our way a little bit, but that gives you an idea of the sort of scale.
Yeah, and I suppose sort of linked to that, what sort of numbers of SMEs would you expect an ESCO to be working with kind of at one time? I mean, obviously, with that Southwest example, that could be hundreds, couldn't it? So is that feasible? And is there a minimum number that you would want an ESCO to be kind of targeting?
Well, so the way to sort of frame this is as your classic sort of funnel shape. So there's lots of engagement with businesses, lots of businesses, and there's value to that in that you're giving them information that might encourage them to take action off their own bat, and or to do it another time later on. You're planting a seed. So in terms of the kind of basic marketing message, thousands of businesses will be reached, in that way. And we're trying lots of different ways to get that message out there with the Oxfordshire example. But that very quickly tapers down, because for most businesses, it's either not the right time, or it's not hitting the spot, or or whatever. That very quickly comes down to a more manageable number of leads, which I would think would be of the order of a few hundred a year, and then that will come down again. I would expect there to be 10, 20, 30 active projects at any one time for one of these ESCOs. So at the moment, Energy Solutions Oxfordshire have got, I think, about 20 projects at the final stage of the pipeline before they go ahead and implement. And that's just waiting now on the end of lockdown, whatever we're on, 3, in order to get out on site and to do some of that work. So it's a little bit gut feel at the moment. And obviously, we've only got the Oxfordshire example to really sort of drill into, but that should give you an idea of how that, the key thing is the funnel and how the funnel should work.
Yeah, absolutely. And just another question here about local authorities. So if we're saying that it would be lovely for a local authority to work in partnership, perhaps with a community energy company, to run something like this, who would be the best person, or what sort of role within a local authority would fit well to lead this sort of project, and how could they find, how could they get in touch with you? Obviously there's information here, but what would be the best process for them if they wanted to move this forward?
Well, our thinking, and I'd be delighted for this to be challenged, but our thinking is that this sits best with economic development teams, because it covers it. I don't want to say ticks a lot of boxes, that sounds very cynical, but it covers a lot of areas that are very important if you're in an economic development role, because it's a way, as much as it's a way to help businesses to decarbonize and become more competitive and resilient and all of that, it's also a way to develop the low carbon supply chain in an area which might turn out to be as important or even more important, because the need for low carbon goods and services is not going away. And I think there's a real drive at the moment to think about, well, okay, in this region, how can we get a head start on that, or how can we move that forward? I mean, we've seen what happens with the Green Homes Grant recently, in terms of when there's a supply chain crunch. I'm not saying it's the supply chain's fault, by the way, but there has been more demand than the supply chain's able to currently process. But so I think that's something that's really front of mind, and something that we found. So economic development, in terms of how to get in touch, I would hope that's very easy. We're on all the platforms except for Instagram, as we established earlier on, which we're not on for reasons of having very few pictures to share. But no, epconnect.energy is our website. You can send us a message there, or just email me or one of my colleagues. You've got my address there.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you very much for your time. I think that's probably all we've got time for. And yeah, absolutely. If anyone is interested in being a partner and setting up an ESCO, please do contact Alex. You can also find out more about ESCO-in-a-box on the Carbon Copy website at carboncopy.eco. Just look in the initiative section and you'll find more information about it there. And thank you very much for watching, and we hope you found it interesting. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.